battling the relentlessly negative doom and gloom news media. It's the Nick Stenger Show, coming to you live from the Stenger Family Office headquarters. It's your host, Nick Stenger.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Nick Stenger Show. My name is Nick Stenger. We are the Stenger Family Office for the past 43, going on 44 years. The Stenger family has made it our mission to deliver both clarity and confidence to help secure your financial future. You have been coming back each and every week so diligently, trying to get the clarity and confidence. We thank you so much for being with us. We are trying to make sure that you have stayed on your plan despite all the doom and gloom times that you wanted to panic and jump off the ledge. We kept you on your plan, hopefully. I think we lost maybe one of you the past 5 years to the doom and gloom, and I hope that you did get back on your plan. We don't know for sure, haven't heard from you, but everybody else is still on their plan. So thank you for being on the show. Episode 174, the Trump bump. And no, I'm not going to make any big political statements today. So before you have a mini meltdown or a panic attack, please just hear what I'm about to tell you, not as a political statement, but rather as just about policy. And that's what we want to talk about today. But before we do, if you don't mind pulling up the slides there, producer we've got a couple of big events coming to you live very soon. Our biggest one in Houston that we've ever done at the Four Seasons Hotel on April 25th and 26th. Don't miss this thing. And we sent out one invite, I believe, a couple weeks ago at the beginning of the new year here, and literally just one email. We haven't really pushed it hard except for last week on the show, and it's already halfway full. So if you were planning on coming to this thing, get it on the calendar now. You can register online. You can register through the email we sent you. It is invite only, so you need to get an invite directly from us. So give us a call, 630-912-8431. That's our direct line, and we can get the custom invite out to you, and we'd love to see you with us. It's going to be Houston at the Four Seasons, April 25th and 26th, and we're going to cover literally everything you can possibly imagine that relates to your personal finances. We're going to cover tax. We're going to cover estate planning. We're going to cover our investment portfolio in depth and financial planning. And some of our clients have referred to it as financial boot camp. That's one way to look at it, or just drinking from a fire hose, just a ton of information at once. So get that on the calendar. And then we're going to follow that up in October up here in Chicago with our normal event we do, Investor Day. And of course, it's Investor Day 2026, but it's in this year. We always are forward looking with the title of it, but it's this year, October 9th and 10th are the dates. We have our special guest speaker arranged coming to you from Wisdom Tree, and then we have Andrew Opdyke with First Trust booked again. Unbelievable. And that event gets some of the best reviews we get throughout the entire year. October 9th and 10th up here in the Chicago area, and everybody is welcome to attend that as well. So get those events on the calendar. Here we are, episode 174, the Trump bump. What's going on? Well, since President Trump was inaugurated and since his election in November, the stock market is now up. S&P's up about 7%. That's the next slide, if you don't mind throwing that up as well. And is it because of President Trump? Is it because of his policy? Is it because of just corporate profits? I think there's a mix of all three. And there certainly is some renewed business optimism going on. There's certainly some optimism that you haven't seen from CEOs, from corporations, from the last administration. And again, this isn't a political statement. It's just to tell you the facts, the data, all the mass statistics that are out there. People are just more optimistic. So you can not like me for saying that. I'm just telling you the truth. That's what's happened. So when businesses get more optimistic, when investors are more optimistic, what do? They invest more. And so I would relate this to Argentina with what Javier Milei has done is he's created just an absolute boom of economic activity in a country that had a lot of problems. Before he got there, Argentina had 40% inflation, tons of debt, a lot of issues, tons of natural resources, by the way, that they could have been using and didn't, which is ridiculous, which is crazy. And by the way, every country who doesn't use its own natural resources successfully ends up paying a major price, especially when it comes to inflation, because energy prices drive such a huge portion of our costs on a day-to-day basis. And so Argentina now has turned it around under Javier Milei. He's reduced the size of government. He's gotten the government out of the way of the small business. And obviously, you got to have government. I've said this on the show every week. So I don't want you to walk away from today's show and say, oh, Nick's an anarchist. He thinks that you shouldn't have government. No, of course not. You got to have government. You have to have rules. You have to have regulations. You have to have red tape. But when that goes too far, it burdens the entrepreneur, and it's impossible to create wealth. I mean, just look at the EU. The EU is just, I hate to say it, a dumpster fire right now. There's no innovation. There's nothing going on that you could say, hey, that relates to, or that's a competitive product to NVIDIA, or that's a competitive company to Apple or Microsoft. There's just nothing anywhere close to that scale. And it's not because the Germans are, by the way, our family, Germans, the nation of engineers, okay, it's not like they're not smart people. They're very smart people. But what have they done? They left Germany and they came here to the US and they built their business in Silicon Valley, for example. So that's the reality of good policy. And so I want to just equate Javier Milei in Argentina to some of the policies I think are coming in the U.S. down the road, and will continue to move the stock market forward over the long run, despite, if we have another correction, we're going to have some pullback. We're going to have some doom and gloom along the way. But I think as you look back over the next 3-4 years, you're going to say, wow, corporate profits have really gone up faster than I thought. Economic activity is just re-engaged at a higher degree than I thought was possible. And all that's because of this economic Garden of Eden that I've talked about. If you've been following the show for a few years now, I wrote about this 2 or 3 years ago now, how the economy is really like a garden. And so the basics of planting a garden or having a successful crop, if you're in agriculture, is you got to have good soil. You have to have a foundation where you can actually have a yield. Well, that's the United States. And so the United States, because of our policy, because of the rule of law, because of personal property rights, because you can pass your net worth down to beneficiaries according to your wishes, not according to the government's wishes, like in China. Remember, you die in China, the government says, thank you very much. That was very nice of you. And that becomes President Xi's property to do whatever he'd like with. That's not the case in the United States. The United States, you at least get to decide where your life's work goes. Because of that, entrepreneurs want to be here. Entrepreneurs want to create businesses on our soil. So we have this fertile soil of innovation. Now, what happens in a garden after a while? You plant your seeds, you got to water them, you got to have some sunlight, and the sunlight and the water of the U.S. economy has been relatively simple, basic, slow growth over time of the federal government. Now, the federal government's never been bigger than it is today. So you might say, Nick, that's ridiculous. You know, how could you say that the government's grown slowly? Well, we have moved forward slowly over time thanks to checks and balances. And so that's one of the reasons why the U.S. economy has flourished, is because we don't have these massively wild swings in policy. Some countries where you have a parliament or you have a dictator, and this is why communist countries, despite what some of these top-ranked schools want to tell you, oh, yeah, don't worry. We just haven't tried the real form of communism. If we just give communism another try, it's going to work this time. You're like, really? Because last time I checked, every time we did communism, like 50 million people died. So, yeah, and by the way, socialism doesn't work either. So I can't believe I still have to tell people this, but the reality is it doesn't work. And the reason why is because you have too big of shifts in policy. The U.S., yeah, you've got the left, you've got the right, you've got disagreement, you've got arguments, you've got mean tweets, you've got all the stuff that goes on in a republic. But at the end of it, because of the federal, because of the judicial, because of the legislative, because you have these different balancing acts of power, not a whole lot of crazy stuff gets done, even though it feels like it at the time. We've still had relatively the same tax situation we've had since Obama, even after having 3 or 4 different elections. So that's a major, major difference in the United States that allows businesses to plant the seed of investment and then be able to watch that flourish over time and not have to constantly be changing to the whims of a new administration. So yes, there's changes with the new administration. And right now, President Trump does have the House, he has the Senate, he has the courts, he's got a lot of power on his side. But remember, there's always the midterms, and that could change. There's going to be another election coming. And one of the last things that the founders, I don't think, really thought about that we just need to fix in our country, which if you're on the left, you're on the right, hopefully we can all agree on this, is term limits. I mean, it's absolutely insane that you have literally dinosaurs walking around in D.C. They've been there. Some of them look like they were there in 1776. Some of them look like they might have signed off on the Declaration of Independence. And you're like, how in the world are these people still here? And you're also thinking, wait a second, these people make like $200,000 a year, best case scenario, and they've somehow racked up a net worth of like $300 million. You're like, okay, I have my calculator. I'm trying to do the math. Nick, can you turn my 200 grand of income into 300 million? I'm sorry to tell you, the only way you can do that is go be a senator and or be in the House. It doesn't happen in a normal situation unless there's something funky going on behind the scenes. So we got to fix that. We got to get term limits. We got to get these people out of there once in a while. It's insane. So that's coming. I think we're gonna have smaller government. We're gonna have more common sense. And instead of having like 16 different rule books, why don't we just have one? And I think that's what most companies want. Most CEOs just say, hey, we understand. We want to play by the rules. We know there has to be regulation to have a functioning society, but just give us one set of rules. Why are there 15 different organizations involved? How come there's different, all these different groups who have something to say about this? Let's just have one set of rules. And that's, I think, where we're going to go towards. That's part of your garden, is that's a healthy, functioning a garden. Okay. And so that's your starting point. And then what happens when you have a weed once in a while? Well, you need to have some maybe some fertilizer, maybe some anti-weed whacking processes or something like that. Well, in our economy, in the U.S. economy, what you have is states' rights. And so this is the beautiful thing of the United States. And think about how brilliant the founders were when they set this up. The states have a lot of power. A lot of countries don't have that. The federal government says, this is what we're doing, this is how it goes, and that's the new policy. The states have a lot of power. And so if you don't like being in Illinois here, where we are, because it's like -9 degrees outside, the taxes aren't that great, and it's kind of a corrupt state. I hate to say it, but it is. It's been known for that for years. You're thinking, well, what do I do? You just move next door to Indiana. It's not that hard. You go to Tennessee, you go to Florida, you go to Texas. And again, you don't have to like me for saying this. It's all in the data, though. Look at the net migration trends. All the U-Hauls are going one way from Illinois, from New York, from California. They're going to Texas. They're going to Tennessee. They're going to Florida. That's just the reality. Again, you may think, Nick, that's a very bold political statement. It's not. It's just U-Haul data. You can go look it up. It's just the reality of people chasing favorable policies. And so that's how you deal with bad decisions from politicians, is you just vote with your feet. You move, or you vote with your wallet. You change what you're doing. And so that's, I think, what's happened. And so as we continue along the next couple of years, I believe you're going to see smaller regulations. You're going to see less regulation. You're going to see less spending, hopefully, on a government level. Taxes will probably change a little bit. I don't think they're going to change a lot. Quite frankly, the last tax bill was really good. And the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which, by the way, has been in place even under a red and blue president. Again, nothing's changed there. I think we're going to renew some of that. And so once you start adding this up, it creates an environment where CEOs say, this is a pretty good time to invest. This is a pretty good time to get some capital to work. And so you see this economic cycle where you go through a 4-year period, or you go through an 8-year period, depending on if the president gets elected twice. And corporations are spending money, they're investing, they're getting their dollars to work, and then they're not quite sure. There's some uncertainty going on politically or economically, and they start pulling back a little bit. They save up for a rainy day. At least the smart companies do that. The biggest and the best have done that. And now they're sitting on these record stockpiles of cash, and their investors are starting to get a little impatient. They're saying, guys, when are you going to start reinvesting some of this money? You got to do something. You got to either buy your own stock back. That's corporate buyback. You got to pay us more dividends. You got to reinvest. You got to buy a company. You got to do a merger and acquisition. So I think if you listen to all the earnings calls that have come from Goldman Sachs, from Morgan Stanley, from Wells Fargo, from UBS, all the major investment banks, I've listened to all of them. They all say M&A activity is expected to really pick up here in 2025, 2026. You're going to start seeing that M&A cycle come back. And so I believe, given all of the policies, all of the positive movements that are coming the next few years, I think you're going to see corporations produce higher profits than ever before. Is the stock market going to go up because of President Trump? Well, maybe. I don't know if it's correlation or causation, but more importantly, I think the stock market's going to go up because of good policy that's going to improve corporate profits. So remember, the president doesn't drive corporate profits. And you have to be very clear on this, and you have to understand this, because if you had changed your investment strategy and had a panic attack because Joe Biden was coming in and going to become president last time, you would have missed out on like 4 unbelievable years in stock market history. And so same thing now. If you're on the left and you hate the big orange man in the White House, okay, don't worry about that. Don't worry about the person. Focus on the policy and focus on corporate profits. And I think you're going to be happy you stayed on your plan. So don't get lost in the sauce. Don't get wrapped up in the person. Get wrapped up in the policy. And I think we've got favorable policy coming very soon. So in portfolio management now, just to wrap up, we've got a couple minutes left to talk about positioning and how do you make money during the next couple years. I think one of the counterintuitive points is you'd think, hey, we're going to unleash U.S. energy production, and that's going to be a great thing for oil companies. I would just urge caution. I don't think oil companies are radically overvalued, so don't hear me wrong. But just think about this logically. It's all supply and demand. If we're going to start producing more energy, which we certainly are, it looks like we're going to unleash U.S. prosperity again and U.S. energy. By the way, we have more oil under our feet here in the U.S. than most places on Earth. Absolutely incredible. We just haven't tapped into it as much as we should have. As we start to increase U.S. oil production, prices could go down. So just be careful there. We've been equal weight on energy and not underweight, not overweight, but just equal weight there. And then one of the other things to just keep an eye on is technology. And you're watching this major pivot with the big tech guys. You went from Mark Zuckerberg being like anti-free speech, hating anybody who says anything good about President Trump or anything that doesn't align with a certain ideology, completely pivot and now become President Trump's best friend. He appears on the Joe Rogan podcast and he's like, hey, I'm like a cool I'm a conservative guy now. I'm free speech. I'm anti this agenda that we were doing before. And Joe Rogan rightfully called him out. And he's like, wait a second, like these are all the things you just did the past 4 years. And now all of a sudden we're supposed to believe you're on the other side. So that's where you're starting to see this pivot. Why are these tech guys starting to support Trump? Well, part of it's because they got to kiss the ring. They just got to get in line here and hope that J.D. Vance, especially, who has talked openly about breaking up big tech companies, is not going to actually do that. And so remember the Standard Oil days. We were talking about this the other week at the office, how Standard Oil, Chevron, Exxon, a couple other big pieces today, if you put those pieces back together, wouldn't even be worth a third of what Microsoft is now worth today. These big tech companies have really run away towards these massive monopolies. So just be aware of the fact you could see some volatility with big tech. Now, to be clear, I'm not selling my Microsoft stock. I'm not selling my Apple stock. I'm not selling NVIDIA or anything like that. I'm just telling you, be prepared for some volatility. In the end, what happens is they just maybe spin off some of these sections. So maybe Google has to come out and spin off YouTube, right? YouTube's this enormously valuable asset. They have to spin it off. Maybe you have to spin off the cloud business. We'll see what happens. I don't know. But if the market thought that these are going to be terrible long-term decisions for the stock prices, we'd already be down 20, 30% in the news. We're just not. And so remember that the market is a forward-looking indicator of what's to come. And so if you think these bad things are going to happen, they'd already be priced in. So what I'm looking for in big tech is I think we're going to have volatility. We're going to see some choppiness here or there. But in the end, it's not really going to be a negative event for shareholders because think about if Google spins off YouTube, you still have Google stock, you still have YouTube, hypothetically. So that's how it works. Don't have a panic attack here. What else is coming? There's certainly more investment going on in AI. We're seeing a lot happen with NVIDIA. We're seeing a lot happen with getting chip manufacturing back to the U.S. and just manufacturing in general. So we like anything that has to do with the manufacturing space. We like the reshoring of bringing investment dollars back to the U.S., doing more here. But we like the pipes and wires of it. So if you had gone out and bought every single tech company, for example, in 1999 or 2000, you and equal weighted them, literally just bought 25 or 50 different companies and had the same amount in each one of them, you'd have exactly a 0% return now 25 years later. Why? Because half of them go up, half of them go to zero. the reality is it's very hard to pick the winners and losers. And especially in tech moves so quickly thanks to Moore's law. It's going to be really hard for you to figure out what tech stock is going to outperform the rest of them the next 10 or 15 years. So instead, what we like is the companies that support these tech companies or support the next wave of innovation, similar to the pipes and wire strategy that Warren Buffett has talked about. And so, for example, instead of just going out and buying the new .ai IPO that just came out, we like the companies like NVIDIA that are supplying the GPUs to all of them. Or we like the companies like Prologis, and I'm not telling you individual recommendations to go put your entire net worth in any of these things. I'm just giving you examples. Prologis, for example, in the industrial warehousing space, has supplied warehouses to everybody. They supply them to Walmart, they supply them to Amazon, and both of those companies have done well. Prologis has done well as a result. That's the pipes and wires of the next economy. So I just wanted to give you some ideas on how we think about that. That was a client question that came in last week was, Nick, hey, what are you guys thinking about AI? Are you putting a lot of money into AI stocks? And the answer is sort of, but we're doing it through the back door rather than just buying the new hottest AI company, because it's very hard to predict what's going to happen there. So just a little insight into where I think the economy is headed, where I think markets are going, and we are going to have a pullback. We're going to have a 10% correction at some point this year. Who knows what it'll be about? Nobody's going to see it coming, and least of all the economists that you see on CNBC. These guys literally are bullish on Monday, and by Friday they're bearish, and nobody calls them out on it except for us. And I'll just call out one person this week. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings here. I don't want to make anyone feel bad. But Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan. And I'll just say Jamie Dimon is just a brilliant guy. I mean, he's absolutely one of the best entrepreneurs of all time, one of the best CEOs of all time. JP Morgan is a top 5 position in Stenger Family Office portfolios. And he's just been an incredible manager of that company. So he's just a wonderful leader of that business. But when it comes to making economic predictions, you just have to be careful, because Jamie Dimon has, over the past 5 years, said the world's coming to an end about 15 different times. And you're thinking, well, if the CEO of the largest bank in the world is saying that the world's coming to an end, shouldn't we pay attention and get nervous? And my whole point is, think about Jamie Dimon's role at JP Morgan. He's supposed to be a risk manager. He's not supposed to bat 1,000. He's not supposed to shoot for the stars. He's supposed to make sure the bank doesn't go out of business and lose all their capital. So he's done that because he's always worried about a rainy day. That's good. That's called doomsday prepping. And all companies, if you have any sort of sense, you're doing that. You're worried about a rainy day, so you prepare. But if you over-prepare, if you constantly are worried that the world's coming to an end, once in a while, the sun shines. Once in a while, it's not an economic hurricane. Once in a while, the garden grows. The economic garden is flourishing. And you just have to realize that 75% of the time, the stock market does flourish. If you look at a rolling 10-year time frame or a rolling 10-year time in history of the economy, we've never had a 10-year time frame where things aren't up at the end of the 10 years. And so that's the reality, is the stock market, the economy favors optimism. So Jamie Dimon, A+ for running JP Morgan, D- for economic predictions, and that's okay. But just be careful of who you're listening to on a day-to-day basis, because if you take the bait, if you take the narrative from CNBC or from Fox Business or Bloomberg or whichever one you listen to, just be careful, because you could cost yourself a lot of money in the process of trying to time out the next correction. I'll leave you with Peter Lynch's quote: more money has been lost preparing for corrections than in the actual corrections themselves. So stay on your plan. Don't panic. If you start getting nervous, give us a call first, and we will hopefully talk you off the ledge and help you make a much better decision than panicking and selling. And I think, despite politics, if you focus on policy, if you focus on what's going on underneath the underneath the surface and behind the scenes of the U.S. economy, you're going to be happy you stayed on your plan. Thanks for being with us. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share it with your friends and family. Get them to clarity and confidence. Don't forget about those events coming up, April 25th and 26th in Houston, October 9th and 10th in Naperville in October. And we'll see you soon. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week for episode 175.